What's going on, Chris?
What's going on, man? How you doing?
Doing well, doing well. Give me a second. I'm trying to cross post.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I was trying to do the same thing. You putting it in made?
Yeah.
All right, then I'll put it in a couple of groups I'm in. Boop.
Copy.
It's so weird that I have my laptop here and my PC here, and then I got the two mice sitting next to each other, and I'm like not paying. I'm like just doing it and not looking and just grabbing the wrong mouse. Like, oh, I'm on the other computer.
Right, got too much going on.
Got too much going on. First world problems, you know that.
Yes, sir.
First world problems. All right, there we go.
So we got a few. We got a few in here. We got 3. Hey, what the preachers be saying? Come on in the room. Come on in the room.
Come on in the room. The network, the network. All right, and then let's go. Detroit. Boop.
Got wifey logged in.
Hey, how you doing, sis?
All right, so all right. That's gonna have to do. So I'll kick it off. So I guess I can say last month. It was last month that we went live and talked about finances. I think it went pretty well. We talked about a multitude of different things, a hodgepodge of just different, really high level disciplines that I feel like the things we were talking about, anybody could do. I don't feel like you had to really do a whole bunch of studying or research for some of the things we were talking about. We talked about things like, a phrase that I kind of coined, giving yourself a raise, which is kind of just looking at your monthly expenses and trying to eliminate what you can. And looking at, some of the subscriptions you have, some of the cell phone bills that maybe can be reduced. Can you get your insurance, your auto insurance? Can you get a better rate? And I kind of gave the testimony that I freed up about $450. Um, you know, about 4 years ago per month, and that kind of changed. That was kind of like a catalyst to change my way change my way of thinking when it came to finances, because that really relieved some pressure from me being able to free up $400 in my monthly expenses. Um, yes, sir. Dion says financial discipline is a must. Yes, sir. All right, Mr. Phil Fox, honored. Yes, sir. In the land of, yeah, I don't want to mess that
The
up.
Anna Sha'aba and Potawatomi.
Sound like to me you speaking in tongues to me.
No, those are natives. Potawatomi,
Yeah, yeah.
I see quite regularly because there's a lot of like native, like particularly when you go to the UP, there's a lot of reference to like local native stuff. Just
Oh
like
yeah.
Detroit's filled with all of these French terms like Gratiot and Dequinder and all that stuff, you know.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. But yeah, I
Never
respect the
speaking in
lineage.
tongue.
I just can't track. I can't track mine down. My dad says we got Indian in our family, but my ancestry test said that is a lie.
Well, sometimes it's I know that I'm not trying to, you know, make your dad have to be a truth teller on this, but sometimes it's like when native people aren't taking DNA tests, then they're not going to register in your gene pool. And if they start taking DNA tests, because they said that that's part of the, you know, the African ancestry. The reason that they know the African ancestry to some degree because of the fact that they know that 80% of us was, you know, came from over there, so they can trace that. But they said they need more people on the African continent to start taking DNA tests, narrow it down. The problem is they steal that information and sell it just like they do with our data, and so
Absolutely.
people are very have a strong aversion to that type of stuff. So
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yep. So yeah, the stuff we talked about last month was really practical, right? Really practical. I feel like anyway. So one of the things I want to talk about today is the 401k plan. So, you know, I happen to be a hiring manager, and what I've noticed since I've been a hiring manager for some years is you literally have to talk people into enrolling to the 401k because people live in the right now. So, um, people, when you tell people that's going to be another deduction from their check, even though you tell them the organization is going to match your money. So if you put in for my organization, if I put in 6% of my pay, um, my company matches 5%. So it's pretty much 1-to-1. So the first 4% is matched 100%, and then the fifth and 6% that I contribute is matched 50 cents to the dollar, and it's free money. It is free money, and people just will not take advantage of it. So what happens is every year around the time of benefits, you know, the organization is consistently looking at how many people enrolled in the 401k, and you know they'll ask the specific site leaders, "Hey, are you guys talking to your people about 401k? Let's get people enrolled in 401k," but nobody's interested because everybody's living in the right now. So I wanted to look.
you should elaborate a tiny bit on that living in the right now, just so people get a kind of a feel for it.
Right. So,
What's
like
up?
I was saying just a few seconds ago, when you start talking about a payroll deduction, you know, people just don't want anything else taken out of their check, not thinking about the
It's
fact
free.
that
It's free money. Like someone
free
like
money.
your company's like
Yeah.
before you gain a single penny in interest or gain, your money is doubling. So if you put
Yes.
in $10, they're putting in 10, so you automatically have $20. So even if you never gain a penny in interest,
Yeah.
you're doubling your money right
Yeah.
off. Sorry, I'm sorry.
So a 401k is basically a fund where you put in money the company matches. If you work for a good company, the company matches it, and then into um, it goes into investment funds, and it goes into the stock market. And the average rate of return in the stock market, on average, is 10% annually. And I've got a tool here I want to show you guys just to do some exercises, right? Just to kind of show an illustration. So on this example here, right? If somebody is 18 years old, let's just say 18 years old, you say, you know what, college is not my thing. I want to go work in a warehouse, or I want to go do something. I want to work at Home Depot or whatever, right? And let's just say your annual income is $38,000. So that's about $19 an hour. So I don't think that's a reach these days. Kids out of high school can make about $19 an hour at a real job. Um, so starting balance in your account $0 in the 401k. So I use the example for my organization at my job, right? So if I contribute 6%, the employer matches 5%. And then say, for instance, you want to retire early. Say to yourself, I'm not working past 50 because I'm not going to work until my 60s, right? With that average rate of return of 10%, and with 401k fees averaging 0.5%, this tool here takes into consideration that you'll be getting 2% raises on average
which is
annually,
below inflation, if you remember the last show.
which is below inflation.
Let me make one more comment. That means that you're making less money. Even though you're making more money, the value of that money is less. And
Yep.
often employers prey or play upon your ignorance. The fact that you just think, oh, I'm getting a raise, when in reality, your raises are less than inflation. So technically, you're making less money than when you actually started, based on your purchasing power.
Yep. You'll have less disposable income once you bounce that up against inflation. Because inflation in a normal market before COVID, inflation was about 2%. Now inflation is like 3 or 4% for the past 4 years. And if you ask people that are living it, right, the people that are going to the supermarkets, at the gas pump, and trying to take care of a family, it don't feel like 4% or 3%. It feels like 30%, right? But based off of what we just talked about, at the age of 50, you're gonna have almost $1 million saved up. And so 6% would be $190 a month, right? So some people would say, how could I free up $190 a month, right? And some of the stuff that we were talking about last week, you know, make your coffee at home, don't eat out. And if you can, don't get a car payment. That's more than $190 a month, right? So this may seem unrealistic to some people, but I'll tell you this. So the first check that I ever had a 401k deduction, yeah, you felt it because you're like, my check feels different. It's a little bit lighter than it normally is. So this is not 190 a week. This is 190 a month, which is what, 47.50 a week. And I'm sure most of us spend $47.50 on something dumb every week. So if to tighten up just a little bit, maybe not eat out, and maybe not buy that pair of sneakers, or maybe cancel that that monthly subscription. If people try hard enough, you can figure out how to free up $47 a week. So starting at a young age, right out of high school, and then say, for instance, you say, you know what, I'm bored at home. I'm gonna go ahead and work until I'm 55. That goes to 1.6 million. That goes from 997,000 to 1.6 million in just 5 years of difference. See what the way it goes just like this chart. See this chart here, how the vertical just starts. The longer you work, the vertical just increases, and the money just starts compounding faster and faster and faster. So if you work till you're 60, that's 2.7. So just by working 10 more years, you
I'm
might
sorry. I thought my ringer was off.
say to yourself, hey man, I want to enjoy my wife, I want to enjoy my family, I want to enjoy my boat. I could live off this $1 million because I got some other stuff going on. That's cool. Hey, I want to open up if you're in Detroit, you want to open up a Coney spot, or you want to open up a corned beef restaurant or whatever, right? That $1 million may be your launching pad. But if you got like an easier job, you've worked your way up, you've invested into a company and they've invested in you, and you want to work until you're what, 60? 2.7 million. I mean, like I said, and it's all because of compounding. So the way the market runs, the longer you're in a 401k investment tool, see how that vertical goes like just straight up like that? It's like it's catching momentum. It's going almost vertical with the gains. So if you look at, okay, let's look at the difference between retiring at 50 versus retiring at 51. See that? Somebody work one more year and work and get like another $100,000 in retirement because of how rapidly this starts snowballing as far as your returns go. So down here at the bottom, this is your employer match and what you contribute, right? So this is what you take out of your check and what your employer matches. But meanwhile, this is going to be what the stock market is doing with your money and your employer's money. The stock market is going to take your money and your employer's money, and it's just going to start building momentum. And you can see right here on that pop-up how fast that thing just starts basically catching fire. And then say, for instance, you're like, you know what? I got an easy job. I sit down all day. One more year. There's one more year. It 52, another $100,000. And most models were set up for you to retire at what, 65? So if you retire at 65, $4 million. And again, this is not modeled off of you making or you starting off at 18 with a silver spoon in your mouth, or this is not even plant money. This is not even Ford money, right? Because you going to Ford, if somebody get out of high school and get into Ford, if they're tier one, what is tier one? Probably 70,000, Chris.
I don't know after that last contract, but I mean, I can say that's
That's about 35 an hour. Tier one.
Yeah, I don't know. It's been a minute, so
Yeah. But let's just say,
don't get me telling stories.
let's just say tier one at Ford, if you get out of high school, is $30 an hour. So with no overtime, you're making 60,000, and you retire at 60, 4.2 million. You retire at 65, almost 7 million. But I think I'll get the point. The 401k, they say Dave Ramsey and some other folks, they conclude that the 401k is the most common vehicle to millionaire status. Because a lot of times when people talk about millionaire, you're thinking like Hollywood, lights, camera, action, NBA ball player, NFL star, there's more millionaires walking among us than that are on TV. Um, and a millionaire simply means assets versus liability. You know, assets or liability minus assets, your net worth is 7 digits, $1 million or more. Like there, those people are walking around every day and have never been on a big screen, never been on a basketball court or a football field, um, and most of them have gotten to that point of wealth through the vehicle of 401k.
That's powerful stuff, man. People don't, one of the important things to take away from that is like often you've like first making $1 million seems out of reach for the
Hmm.
average person. And you just showed how very much in the reach of the average person it is with a little bit of discipline. First of all, taking advantage of employee match of 401k, like your money literally doubles every time you put it in there. And then with just a conservative estimate of what the market normally does over time of this 10%, how much it amplifies it, because every time it's not only gaining that 10%, that 10% is now gaining every year. It's adding to that total value, and then it's increasing the amount you're gaining 10% off, and it's
Compounding.
amplifying it. You're compounding, right? So yeah, so
Yeah.
that's a huge way. And then as you pointed out, that first time you do that deduction, you feel it. Just like the first time you get a raise, you're like, yay, I got some more money, even though you really don't in most cases. But then after 2-3 checks, it becomes a normative part of you. You just get used to whatever it is that's coming in, and you adjust to living off of whatever it is you're coming in, and it's sort of out of sight, out of mind. But what's encouraging is every now and then you peek in that account, and you go, oh wow,
Yeah.
because it's like, man, that's more money than I probably ever thought I was going to see, owned by me, liquid cash in my life. But there it is. It's right there. It's a big pile of money. And you didn't really even get into how with a $4 million balance, like you never have to consume that.
Right.
That's something that ultimately you could end up passing down as an inheritance to your children, because that money is, you're going to live off of the annual interest of that money. That's what you're going to
Yeah.
live off of. So you're
Yep.
never going to even consume that the balance that's in that account, and it's not going to dwindle in it because you're not because you're using it. No, once you get to that retirement age, you might have 80, 100, $120,000 annually that you're growing in interest off of that. So instead of you consuming the balance, you're living off that $120,000 in interest, which is a healthy income. With the rate of inflation, that might be, that's going to be, I think it'll probably, in our lifetime, $120,000 will probably be a pretty healthy income at all times. It'll never sort of, inflation will never get to the point where that's not a solid income
Yeah.
in our
Another thing I
lifetime.
didn't mention either is what I've learned too is, because I didn't learn financial principles at home. I learned a lot of stuff from just talking to people at work, talking to older men at work. Um, and so what a lot of people do is, once you're in the 401k for a while, you've made some contributions, you've got your foundation set. Say you may have $100,000 in there, which comes really quick once you start contributing and put those disciplines. What I mean by really quick is, I mean, it might take you, depending on what your earnings are. It may take you 5 years, 10 years, um, but that's still relatively quick when you look at your whole lifespan. But anyway, you can take a loan out from your 401k, and what people do is they buy a car. So instead of you going to um, Ford Financial or GM Financial or Stellantis lending or whatever these organizations and finance houses are called, you can get a 401k loan from yourself, and you can go to the dealership with a check. And when they ask you, Mr. Samuel, how do you want to finance this? You can say, well, I don't want to finance. I want to pay cash. And you can buy your next vehicle in cash and pay yourself back. You have to pay the 401k loan back. But what I mean by pay yourself back is you're paying that money back to your own 401k with interest, but the interest doesn't go to Fidelity or whatever bank holds your 401k. That interest goes back to you. So that's the killer part right there is instead of you paying what $5,000-$6,000 in interest on a car, you pay yourself back that interest and it goes right back into your 401k. I just thought that was pretty cool.
It is cool. That's super cool. Ooh, I just make sure I didn't unplug my thing. Okay. Yeah, that's super cool. And that's again, you know, we often think that these types of things are out of reach for us, or that, you know, wealth and you know, financial stability or financial security is out of reach from it. It's not. You know, it's for the average person, it's incremental. It's being steadfast. It's doing the wise, you know, easy, low-hanging fruit things, like taking that free money by getting that match, you know,
Yes.
doubling your money. You know, that's the start. And then, you know, recognizing that you put it in the market. And even if you're just investing in like mutual funds, or you're investing in, funds in a sense of like it's a bunch of different stocks, and all those stocks are put together because they're in the same industry. Say they're in the tech industry, or they're in the auto industry, or some other industry. They all get put into one big bucket, and you can buy their stocks that regularly gain over long periods of time. And then so man, just investing in something like a mutual fund will get you that 10% or more annually, which you get that. Sometimes there were times where in good markets where I was growing 17, 18, 24% a year. Crazy. Crazy. And I didn't know that was back when I didn't even know what I was doing. I was just taking Dave Ramsey advice and diversifying it into the four
main sectors.
The four main sectors. That's basically what I was doing. I basically listened to a video, and then I went into my Fidelity account and I picked ones based on the four major sectors that he had suggested, and boom, it's like this one's doing 17, this one's doing 24, this one's doing 11. It's like, man, this is great.
Yep. And another thing about the 401k, people get skittish and they'll say, well, what if the market crashes? If you're younger than 55, well, depending on what age you want to retire, right? If you're planning on retiring at 62 or 65 and you're under 55 and the market crashes, good. Excellent. You know why? Because now everything that you're investing into your 401k, you're getting at a discount. And then by the time you retire, all of those mutual funds that your 401k is purchasing on your behalf start compounding and increasing, and that 10% annual increase starts really just being fruitful, because people call those paper assets, right? So the asset is the asset. So when the market crashes, and if you're in your 60s and you're planning on retiring when you're 62 or 65, a market crash is bad because sometimes it takes 10 years for it to come back, right? But if you're middle aged and you still got quite a bit of runway before you retire, you're getting those assets on sale. So say if the market decreases by 20%, that means that mutual fund, you get, so every time you get paid, you're buying whatever we just looked at on the calculator. You're buying $200 to put into this mutual fund, but you're getting it at a discount. You're getting every time, every purchase, you're getting it at a discount because the market crashed. You don't want to buy paper assets when the market is at its height, right? Just like right now, the market is at record highs, and I'm making contributions through my 401k, and I feel like I'm getting cheated because I'm buying all of my paper assets at the premium price. So the only, the way it benefits us is when you're close to retiring. If the market goes on a bull run when you're close to retiring, that's to your benefit, but that's that's pretty much my little two
Talk for a
cents.
couple more minutes because I got this one more phone call coming. So I got a friend who's on the side of the road. I'm trying to help. Let's take a couple minutes.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. And I've seen when I was growing up, um what I call growing up is when I was in my early 20s, had my first real job at Pepsi Food Service. I remember the older cats, they would go on their 401k. They would I'm getting a swimming pool put in, and they would get their 401k, um, get it, get that check, and they would do huge improvements on their home. And those are things you can do as well with the 401k. You can get home improvements. Um, if you get into a financial bind, there's also in most 401ks, there is they give you flexibility to be able to to if you got to make an emergency withdrawal, like if say for instance you got mortgage issues, you might be behind going into foreclosure. Uh, you can get, sometimes even if you're not so eligible to get a withdrawal, once you call the brokerage and tell them what's going on, they'll allow you to get cash out of your 401k to catch your home up to get you out of any kind of foreclosure you may be in. So I mean, there's just so many benefits to the 401k, and like I said we uh, before we kind of kicked it off, I just don't understand why so many people. I mean, I do. I understand why, but I just wish they would not. I wish people would not leave money on the table. So every once in a while, there'll be somebody young in the workplace, and I'll try to do that math with them. Like say for instance, somebody makes $50,000, and if the job is contributing, or if the match is, if you contribute if you contribute 6%, the job contributes 5%, right? That person has just left $2,500 roughly on the table of free money by them not participating in the 401k, all because they didn't want their check to be a little short in their mind. The way
Mhm.
the way they were approaching it, they didn't want that take home to be a little bit less every week in order for the company to match their wages.
Mhm. Amen, man. That's a valuable lesson to learn, and I hope people take it seriously. And even if you don't get a 401k match, most employers offer a 401k match. But even if you don't get a
Mhm.
401k match, even if you just put in your 6%, just cut the numbers that you just saw in half. If you end up with $2 million, $2.3 million at the end of the day, that's still a significant amount of money to be drawn an annual income off of to retire to. So don't let the lack of a match of a 401k, the average employer, even part-time. I know a lot of part-time jobs offer 401k match. Even if they don't offer you health benefits and other benefits, they offer you 401k match.
And the reason 401k matches or 401k is so popular now is because what happened is, um, so most people on here, a lot of people have some kind of connection with Detroit since me and Chris are from Detroit. But I know even if you're not from Detroit, everybody's heard about Detroit filing for bankruptcy, right? The city of Detroit filing for bankruptcy. I'll tell you what was at the root of that. Some people say mismanagement, people want to blame it on Kwame, whatever, right? But the root of it is pensions. So this is what hurt GM, Ford, and Chrysler as well. So a pension basically is a job paying you even though you don't work for them anymore. So what was happening is the city of Detroit, GM, Ford, Chrysler, and I'm using those Detroit examples, Big Three and city of Detroit because that's what I'm familiar with because that's where I'm from. You give these people these pensions. They earned them. Everybody, they sure did earn them. But basically, you're married to these folks until they die. And meanwhile, the life expectancy rate is increasing. These people are living well into their 80s. So basically, you're paying these people pretty much full salaries and healthcare packages all the way until they're deceased. And the city of Detroit and a lot of different organizations, they figured that we're not doing this pension thing anymore because it's too much of an expense. So a 401k is a way for an organization to contribute to your retirement. But when you retire, they're done with you. That's it. No more contributions. The cord is cut. Have a nice life. Enjoy your retirement, right? And that way, that company is no longer on the hook for providing medical care for that employee once they're no longer an active employee. So that's why you see all these 401ks being offered by employers versus a pension. Very, very few companies offer a pension. That's something.
You muted yourself, Sean. The last thing you said was very few companies offer a pension, and then you muted yourself.
Yeah, very, very few companies offer a pension for that reason.
Yeah. That's sort of an antiquated way of funding a retirement is with a pension. It's just difficult to keep up with, as inflation rises. So I get it. Thankfully, it's business, even though it might not always be good business. I want to jump in and talk about, because I got like a water hose, a fire hydrant flow of information, but it's also this is recorded, so you'll be able to come back to this in the future and revisit it if you need to kind of slow it down and catch the details a little bit. So I'm going to be talking. When I say a little fast, I'll be talking at a clear pace, but I'm just going to give you a lot of information. That's what I mean talking about fast. So another way to stabilize your life and to increase your net worth in life is to own a house. Owning a house is like historically why Americans became patriotic. Back at the turn of the 19th century, the U.S., I believe it was the 19th century, the U.S. went on sort of a campaign to get Americans to be more patriotic, and part of it because they had been in all these wars, and that's sending people's kids off to war and all of the ugliness that comes along with that. So one of the things they did is, originally, in order for you to buy a house, you'd have to put 50% of the value of the house down, and you'd pay 100% interest loans until you come up with the other 50% value of the house, and then you pay the house off, and that's how you bought a house. As you can imagine, very few people could buy a house, just the super wealthy, right? So the U.S. government began to fund builders building houses, and then they came up with a system by undergirding loans so that people can get a loan. And it switched it from having to pay that 50% down in full 100% interest loans until you can pay the rest of the balance off, to you can get like a 30-year mortgage. So you can spread out the cost of that house over 30 years and the interest rates are lower. So that's how people started buying homes. You know, if you know some of that history, African Americans were locked out in the beginning, and which is a part of the reason why, if you look at the U.S. Census data, even to this day, our net worth is usually
Hello? I think we lost Chris.
yeah, just my internet just wonked out all of a sudden.
There he is.
All right, yeah, my internet wonked out all of a sudden.
I figured that's what happened.
Yeah, I switched my internet sources, so I should be good here on out. I should be good. All right, so let me get into talking about, you know, home ownership was sort of another major way that you can establish yourself and have a stable life. You know, housing cost is one of the biggest expenses that you have every single month. If you're renting an apartment or you're renting a house, whenever inflation takes place, ultimately over time, your rent goes up. So if you start off by paying you know, $1,000 a month, and then 2 years later they're like, oh, we want $1,100 or $1,200, which is 20%, which is way above inflation, just for the record, you know. And so yeah, that's basically how it is. Whereas if you buy a home, you know, you have more stability. Often it will go up over time. I'll talk about escrows in a minute. That's the most common way that your mortgage payment will go up. So, but it's usually much more controlled, and you always have the foundation of you having equity in that house and ownership in that house, in stabilizing yourself with wealth. And eventually, in a perfect world, eventually you'll own that house, in which case you won't have a mortgage anymore. You just have your taxes and insurance and stuff to keep the house. That said, so let me jump into some of the information. So when you're buying a house, it starts off with some things that you need to do in preparation of buying a house. One is, you know, you got to have some semblance of credit. Now, kind of good news is you can buy a house with a 500 credit score because of federal loans. The bad news is the lower your credit, the more you have to do. Often the more you have to have as a down payment, the higher the interest rate, which means the higher your mortgage is going to be per month. And even if it's not you know, $500, it's still it's still more than what it could be if you had better credit. So the first thing you want to do is sort of, in preparation for, I would recommend that you get yourself a realtor. And a realtor is a person who's licensed by the state to buy and sell homes, to represent you as you buy and sell a home. A realtor will know all of the logistics, everything that you need to do. A realtor can pull your credit and see where it's at, and tell you what you need to pay off, and tell you what you need to do. In most cases, if you don't have a lot of debt, you know, that you can probably within a 6-month period of time go from being not qualified or on the border of qualified to being qualified to buy a house. Okay. So step one is get a realtor. Realtors only, you don't pay a realtor anything. Realtors only make money if you purchase a house, or if you acquire housing through them, because you can rent a house through a realtor, and the realtor will get paid through the person who's renting you the house. They'll pay it. If you buy a house, a realtor will get paid by the person who's selling the house to you. Realtors charge a percentage of the sale of a house, and basically the two realtors, their realtor and your realtor, sometimes it's one realtor that's brokering the entire deal between the two of you. They'll get 6% of the value of the house if the value is sold, and that's how realtors get paid. So all the work that they do prior to that is usually for free. They don't get paid.
Well, my realtor, she really got, she's awesome. She deserved every penny. But she made money when I sold my house and she made money when I bought my house. So she
Hmm.
sold my old house and when I bought my new one. So she really made out good.
My
She worked for it.
my realtor Graylin is like a family member. Graylin has helped me to get 4 different places. So he's got paid 4 times, and then I've probably sent him about 6 or 7 people that's purchased houses. When I worked for Valvoline, which I took my Valvoline shirt off before we got started, I was very much into my employees buying houses. So whenever an employee of mine became an assistant manager and I knew that they were making enough money to buy a house, I immediately started talking to them about that. And like almost all of my employees bought houses while they were working for me, still own their
Oh,
houses today. All of them still own their houses. I still keep up with them on their houses. And this is one of the most, and because they bought their houses when they bought them, most of their houses have doubled in value because of inflation. And so they have stable housing costs. They had more pride as employees because they
mhm.
had something to live for. So yeah, buying a house is a huge thing. And most people think it's harder, just like saving for retirement. They think it's harder or more challenging than what it is. It's not as hard or as challenging as what it is. Often you are a lot closer to qualifying than you think, and you thinking you're not qualifying and living your life, it's going to cost you more money. Just the best thing you can do is find a good realtor, a reputable realtor, and because like all realtors aren't the same. Some realtors see the opportunity of you as a customer long before you have the ability to purchase a house, and they'll put in so much more effort with you because they know that it's going to pay off when they sell you a house. Other realtors only want to encounter you when you're already prepared, and they just want to do the transaction of getting you a house. So realtors make a difference. Also, when you get with a realtor, you have to sign a contract, and it's an exclusivity contract. So even though they're not getting paid, you can't buy a house through another realtor once you sign with them without legally signing another piece of paper saying, I'm no longer using you as my realtor. I'm going to use somebody else. So be careful with that also. Make sure anytime you sign a piece of paper with a realtor, it's not obligating you beyond whatever period of time that you want to use that realtor, and you can always switch. You just have to do it in writing, because if you do not do it in writing, what can happen is if you move on to another realtor and that person sells the house, and then they'll end up having to split their fee, their payment fee with the other realtor, just because the other realtor had you under contract. So you do have to sign a contract, but a contract isn't anything that's like long term or anything like that. It's usually just, hey, you're my realtor right now, and they just want to make sure that what it doesn't happen to them, that you don't have another realtor out there that you signed a contract with. They go do all the hard work, sell the house, and then they got to split that fee with another realtor because you signed with another realtor before them. That's the only reason that you're signing that exclusivity contract. But at the end of and you should honor that. You should respect the fact that this is how that person makes a living. So get yourself a realtor. Number one, you can share a realtor with a seller and a buyer. Just keep in mind, if you don't have a good intimate relationship with that realtor, potentially has a conflict of interest, because they're getting paid for selling a house, and the more they sell that house for, the higher the more money they're going to make, because they get a percentage of it. And if you're buying the house, then that means you're going to be paying that. You're ultimately going to be the one paying the more money. So and like with Graylin, I would never have an issue with him being a buyer, being the realtor of the buyer, a seller, and me if I was the buyer, because I have that type of rapport with him. We family at this point, but
Yeah.
if it was another realtor, you just realize that conflict of interest exists, and in light of that, you want to be careful.
Yeah. So what I did was, so the builder in my neighborhood, they had their own realtors. So I didn't use their realtor. I had my own realtor because I didn't want a realtor that was working for the builder and for me. Because like you said, conflict of interest, what I saw was the builder is putting the most money in their pocket because the builder is building 200 homes in his neighborhood, and the builder is going to continue to rub their back. So he's going to always fight for the builder opposed to me. So I got my own realtor, and she was able to negotiate some stuff for me that I obviously wouldn't have been able to negotiate for myself. and it just worked out better that way.
Yep. And again, that's this. It all varies. The best way to get a realtor is on a referral, and
Mhm.
not all referrals are the same because, like, if my sister's actually a realtor now. Unfortunately, Graylin's been my realtor for so long. I would feel disloyal to him even, going with my sister. You know
Mhm.
what I'm saying? Because I'm like, hey, that's like Graylin's like family now at this point. That said, um, like if sometimes people's aunts, uncles, cousins, because like that was like a hustle. Oh, I'm gonna get a realtor. I got my job, and I'm gonna become a realtor on the side. And that's gonna be my hustle instead of like Uber or something like that. And so now you got these realtors that are sort of new-ish realtors, and they don't have a lot of experience, and they're still trying to figure out life. And God bless them, and I wish them great success. But when you're making probably the largest investment that you're going to make in your entire life, single transaction, contractual contract and investment for stabilizing your life, you want to make sure it goes well. And
It's kind
so
of a big deal.
it's a big deal. You want to go with someone that has a lot of experience and someone that knows all the ins and outs that's going to help you to pick a house. So we're going to talk about some more. So realtors are like one entity in the process of buying a house. And another entity in the process of buying a house is the broker or the bank. Like, who's actually putting up money to actually buy the house? Because like what you're doing is you're saying, I want to own the house, but I don't have the cash to actually buy the house. And so I have some form of credit, and based on my form of credit, a bank, a broker is going to say, I'm willing to loan you that money, but here's what I'm going to charge you for. I'm going to charge you interest. And so the bank or broker is going to make their money off of the interest for the period that they own the loan, because usually they don't own the loan for the full period of time. And then secondly, as they sell the debt of the loan to some other bank that's going to own it, because often what banks do is they'll buy a mortgage, they'll own it for 5 or 10 years, they'll collect some interest off of it for 5 or 10 years, and after making a few thousands, tens of thousands of dollars, because they don't want to maintain that liability for the full 30 years, then they'll sell that debt to another bank. Then that bank will collect. The first bank has got all their money out and they've made a profit. They're good. They're happy. Good in the sense they're happy. And so now to say, and they just do that. That's why if you own a house for a long period of time, you'll notice that after so many years, they'll go, oh, someone else is going to be servicing your loan. You get a letter in the mail. Oh, the person that's servicing your loan is changing. It's going from this bank to this bank over here, because that's just what banks do. They keep selling them. So, but anyway, banks, brokers are the people who put up the initial actual money to buy the house, and they make money off of you. The worse your credit, the more money that they can make off of you. The better your credit, the less money that they can make off of you. The worse your credit, the more it's going to cost you in your monthly payment. The better your credit, the less it's going to cost you in your monthly payment. So it pays to have good credit when you're buying a house. It pays to have good credit. Now, and then what you can also do is if you're starting off and you're buying a house, you can buy a house with poor credit. And just like that bank can sell your loan after a few years, you can refinance your loan as your credit improves and get a better deal and lower your overall cost by refinancing your loan after your credit goes up. And that's often what people do also. And that's a way for you to both save money monthly, and in the long run, you'll save money by having less interest. Another entity in the process of buying a house is an appraiser. So how do you know how much the house is worth? Like, anybody can just walk up to a house and just go, I like this house. I'll pay, and the person at the house can say, well, give me $500,000, you can have my house. But if all the houses in the neighborhood are only worth $200,000, then if you buy that house for $500,000, then you're $300,000 over the market value. So how do you tell what the value of a house is? They have what's called an appraiser. It's a person who's licensed by the state to appraise houses. And basically what they do is they look at houses that have recently sold, that's the same number of bedrooms, same number of bathrooms in the neighborhoods that you're in within a certain radius of miles. And they see what those houses sold for, which changes every month to month. 1 month a house can sell for $300,000, and then the economy can take a tank, and then the similar house in the very same neighborhood can sell for $50,000 less, and so the values of the houses are going to be adjusted for the average, and then that's going to tell you what the house is worth. Now, a realtor can refer you because everybody works in the same industry, banks and realtors, and all. Sometimes they'll go, "Hey, I have a referral for you. I'll refer you to this appraiser." Sometimes that's a good thing. Sometimes it's not. You just want to do your diligence. Usually appraisers have like a corporate name. You just can Google the corporate name and make sure that they're honest and make sure that they don't have like a bad reputation out there. But appraiser is someone else that you're going to have to pay. And usually like either sometimes what they'll do is if you're under contract. So if you say, I want to buy this house, and you say in a piece of paper saying that I'm going to buy this house because the bank has said, I'm going to give you a loan. There's usually stipulations for getting under contract for buying a house. Usually what they'll do is if they can roll the cost of that appraisal into it. So if the appraisal costs, if you got paid $250 for the appraiser to actually do an appraisal of the house, they'll go, oh, we'll roll it in there. Now, me personally, I would rather pay an appraiser out of pocket because everything that you roll into the cost of your loan, you're going to pay compound interest on. It's good when you're receiving compound interest. It's not as fun when you're paying compound interest. So I don't want to pay, $1,000 for an appraisal that I could have just paid the $250 for it and been done with it. So if I got the $250 in pocket, I'm gonna pay the appraiser out of pocket just so I don't roll. I want to have my loan for as little as possible because that means less compound interest. That means more money in my pocket, less money that I'm giving away to a bank. Another person or entity that's going to be involved in the process is an inspector. Okay, a house can be worth whatever the market value is, but the particular house may have issues. What if the furnace is 20 or 30 years old and is closer to the end of its life to the beginning of its life? Same thing for a roof. Roofs are about 20 to 30 years. These are the types of repair costs that cost in the tens of thousands of dollars. It might cost you $10,000 for a furnace. It might cost you $20,000, $30,000 for a roof. Or if you're buying a house and these things are diminished or they're towards the end of their life, then in the near future of you buying and there's a probability in the near future you buying a house, you're going to have to get it replaced, then you can negotiate buying a house for a lesser amount for factoring in the cost that you're going to end up spending for all of these repairs by knowing what the house actually needs. And the way that you find out what the house actually needs is by hiring an inspector. It's just like the appraiser. So often you get a referral, a realtor or someone involved in the process, an appraiser. They might go, hey, I know an inspector, but again, you always want to look them up. Make sure you're getting a quality person and not just somebody that's just a friend of theirs that they want to make some money. Make sure they don't have a bad reputation out there. It's usually associated with a company, these inspectors. And then, make sure that after you get that inspection that you take it seriously, because like sometimes when you're so excited about buying a house that you lose sight of the fact that whatever you're going to be paying, all the repairs you're going to be paying for. Like when you live in an apartment and the sink break, you call the super and the super comes out and they fix everything, right? When you own a house, you have to pay for it to get fixed. So you definitely want to be very cautious and careful when you're buying a house and pay attention to the inspector and make sure that the inspector catches the various things. Even if you're doing a new inspection, there's videos on these social media sites that show inspectors going around doing their job. And there's one inspector that he goes into new construction and he goes, that ain't right. That ain't right. And he shows how even these builders, like behind the walls, they'll do things wrong. So if you have your inspector prevents you from potential costs down the road by seeing where the house is at and making sure that if there's anything that needs to be repaired that you know about it and you can negotiate that into buying a house. So I've talked about realtors. I've talked about banks, brokers, the people who actually put the money up for the house. I've talked about appraisers, the people who tell you what the house is worth, inspectors who make sure that the house is up to code, or if anything needs to be done, that you can negotiate that into the price. I've talked a little bit about credit. We're going to talk more about credit on another future show, but a little bit about credit and how it impacts your how much you are going to end up paying monthly for the house. Here's a couple other things that you're going to have to consider when you're buying a house. There's a rule that's called the 1/4 rule. So whatever your net, well, they'll say it off your gross income. They go, whatever your gross income is monthly, you don't want to spend more than 1/4 of that on your house. So if your gross income is, let's just say $4,000 a month, that means before any taxes, FICA, Medicare, any health insurance, 401k, whatever your gross income is, they go, if it's $4,000, then you can afford $1,000 a month in a mortgage. That's the rule, the 1/4 rule. So, and as you can see, the higher income you make, the more you can afford to pay for a house. And so that's the general rule of a mortgage. Now, you always want to get it for as little as possible. As I'm talking about, don't roll if you can, don't roll the appraisers and don't roll the inspectors and all of those things in, because all those things, even if it cost you $5, $10, $20 a month, that's $5, $10, $20 a month that you're paying over 30 years, which is a lot of money, versus the $250 that you could pay for a house. When you're buying a house, you usually have to pay a down payment. Depends on what type of loan you get, because sometimes you can get like a FHA loan. FHA loan is a loan that's regulated by the federal government, because they're going to insure the loan. That means that if you renege and you don't pay that loan and it goes into foreclosure and the bank have to take it back, that bank wrote that loan in a way that the federal government undergirded and insured that loan, and therefore the bank's not going to lose any of its money, because the bank did that loan based on the government saying that they want people to buy houses. Or you can do, says FHA loan, federal loan, or there's a conventional loan. The conventional loan is where the bank is actually taking on that responsibility. Conventional loans usually have more, they usually want more money up front. Their regulations are a little bit stringent because they're taking the liability, they're taking the risk by undergirding that loan. Whereas a federal loan, the federal government is always going to pay that loan off. So a bank has no risk in that loan at all, more or less, because the federal government's going to insure it. So even if it goes bad, some of the benefits of a federal loan is federal loans usually have programs. Like right now, every state is a little bit different. So you got to look at your state and see what's going on. So like right now in the state of Michigan, if you're a first-time home buyer, and a first-time home buyer, oddly enough, doesn't even mean a first-time home buyer. A first-time home buyer means a person who hasn't bought a house in 7 years. So you can buy a house and sell that house, and then 7 years later, you're technically a first-time home buyer again. Well, you can get a down payment assistance of up to $10,000 to buy a house. It usually goes along with certain brackets of amount of house you can buy, and usually there's a cap. So they might go, well, you can buy up to a $200,000 house, and if you buy a $200,000 house, we'll help you by giving you $10,000 to put down on that house, right? But that's their limit, is $200,000. If you go over $200,000, you might not qualify any longer for that $10,000. Right now in the county of Wayne, which the city of Detroit falls within the county of Wayne, currently you get up to $25,000 down if you actually buy a house within Wayne County versus other counties. And Wayne County is probably the most depressed county because it has a city Detroit in. But there's some good cities like Northville and Plymouth. There's some good cities like within Wayne County's, confines, where it's like, hey, that $25,000, that's a lot of money. So, when you're buying a house, you might think, oh, I don't have enough money. I didn't save enough money for down payments. But that's not something that you necessarily, that's going to necessarily prohibit you if you realize that there's programs out there for that. And the most common people, particularly poor people, when they're buying houses for the first time, they're almost always bad with a federal loan, because federal guidelines just allow people lower the requirements for you to buy a house, and they aid you in buying a house versus those conventional loans where you basically have to have really good credit, and you often have to have 20% down, and 20% down for a conventional loan. If you're buying a $300,000 house and you got to have 20% down, you got to have $60,000. You can't hear me, Sean? I can't hear you. So something happened with you. Yeah. Okay. I'm gonna keep talking. And you can figure out the sound. All right. So we got down payments. I talked about that. You have the monthly payment, the 1/4 rule. One of the things that's gonna be, sort of seducing is you're gonna be looking at houses. So a realtor will go, look at this house here, and it'll meet your needs. It'll have everything that you need in it. The number of bedrooms, it's in a good enough neighborhood and such. And then they'll show you another house that might be, I hear you now, that might be like $10,000, $20,000 more. But when you do that math in the calculator to see what that monthly note is, it's a difference between $1,000 and $1,200. And they go, oh, you can afford $1,200, but it's more than that 1/4%. And sometimes, very rarely, let me say this, very rarely, usually it's a very disciplined person. Like I've seen people do what they call house poor. And so what they go, I want to be in the best school district for my kids. I want to be in the best neighborhood for insurance. So they'll trade off and they'll go, I'm going to live a lower quality of life that I can live right now. And I'm not going to have a lot of luxuries. I'm not going to have Netflix and Disney Plus. I'm not going to be going out
a new car.
I'm not going to be having a new car. I'm gonna drive a beater, because they're saying I'd rather be in this premium school district. I'd rather pay the extra $200, be in this premium school district to give my kids a better education and a better future. But they're disciplined enough for that. But they call it house poor. And some they do. And you'll go over their house and sometimes they don't have. Often what I've seen this is with foreign people, people who are migrants that are coming over here, and they'll go, in our case, Livonia or Plymouth or, Plymouth, Canton, Salem. They'll go, I want to live in that school district. And so I'll live in a house that's above my actual means, but I can afford it. But I just won't have no luxuries in life. I'm just going to live in that house. But then over the course of 10, 15 years, they, with their raises or moving around and making more money, it pays off, because they'll eventually, the house is it's a more stable market. Like these are markets that are less likely to be impacted drastically during recession. So if the market turns down and people aren't buying as many houses, because it's a coveted school district, people might still be interested in buying houses in that neighborhood, while they might be less interested in moving into other neighborhoods that don't have good school districts like that. So I wanted to point that out, because I know realtors, a bad realtor will say, oh, you can afford this house, because remember, they're getting paid. The more you buy a house for, the more money they're going to get paid. A good realtor is going to say, hey, the 1/4 rule, live within your means, and they're going to steer you toward that. Although you might say, I'd rather go the house poor route. I'm disciplined enough for that. I manage my money well, and I want my kids to have that better school district. I want to have all of that security of housing value and appreciation and all that. So I'm going to go that route, but just make it strategic and don't get accidentally talking to it. Because the worst thing you can do is to buy more house than you can afford and then find yourself in a bind. Because the next thing I'm going to talk about is escrow. When you're buying a house, often you can do it two different ways. One is you can pay your own taxes, like the city that your house is in. Usually, almost always, city and county charges you taxes for buying a house in their city. They're annual. So they usually call them summer taxes and winter taxes. You get two taxes because you're paying one entity and then you're paying the other entity for taxes. And those taxes goes toward building roads. They go towards sewage systems, all the infrastructure stuff that your house is connected to. That's part of the reason that you're paying those taxes, because all of those have to be both built and maintained. So that's why they collect taxes and stuff for that. So most people go, hey, I'm just going to escrow it. And what escrow is so they'll go, okay, if it's $1,000 for my insurance and there's $3,000 for my taxes, that's $4,000 for my additional costs. So whatever my mortgage is, they'll take that $4,000 divided by 12, and they'll have you add that to your mortgage payment. So every month as you're paying your mortgage, you're also putting some money aside. And then every time your taxes are due, they automatically just send it to the taxes. Every time your insurance is due, the bank automatically sends it to the insurance company so that they're paid. So a lot of people get escrow. Now, there are times where, like right now, we're in hyperinflation. And I'll tell you about two situations. One situation is a tax inflation, not very common in places like Michigan, not very common in places where you have like very regular market, but both of these two are extreme cases, but they're cases nonetheless. So in Chicago right now, they had recently where as houses appraised for higher values, the taxable rates on those houses increase also. Usually it increases a few $100s. Maximum I've seen it increase over a short period of time is maybe $1,000. So you'll go on a 10-year period. Your taxes might start off at $3,000 and end up at $4,000, combined for those two tax periods, right? Summer and winter taxes. But in Chicago, they recently had it where people's taxes were increasing by like $6,000. You know what I'm talking about, right? Because he was putting it in the group chat the other day. Did you see that?
Mhm.
You know what I'm talking about, Sean? Yeah, all right.
Talking about the
Sorry.
insurance rates, right?
No, right now I'm talking about the taxes. I'm talking about in
Oh,
Chicago. A brother we know that
no, I
live in
hadn't heard.
Chicago. Oh yeah, brother that we know that live in Chicago from our group said that taxes were going up like $6,000 and $10,000, and they were costing their escrow to go up like $500-600 a month. Significant amount of increase per month because of wonky taxes there in Chicago. That's a unique case, but it's a good example for you to think about how you can still go up. But Chicago, New York, Los Angeles, there's some markets that are like unusual markets because the housing values are so great, so high already that they're really not good cases. But it is
But
something to
sometimes
realize.
what sometimes people do is they get a mortgage on an arm. Are you
Mhm.
familiar with that?
Oh yeah.
So and that puts people in trouble. So a lot of times the commentary would be, oh my taxes and insurance and this went up and my payment went up $800. But when you really start trying to help and like, hey, let me see your mortgage statement or let me take a look at what you got going on, is that they signed up for an arm.
Hmm.
So it's for 3 years, you've got a rate that is like 3% or
Under
three and a
under
half
the
percent.
under the market average usually with
Yeah,
the
something
arm.
really reasonable. And then at the end of that 3-year period, it goes up something significantly. And what a lot of times what happens is when people are sitting in the attorney's office signing their papers, just to make them feel comfortable. Like, oh yeah, right before your arm is about to kick in, you can just refinance. And that's, depending on what's going on in the market or depending on your credit, you may not be able to refinance. And then um, that arm kicks in and all of a sudden you have a mortgage payment that you just can't afford. And then you end up losing your house or going into foreclosure.
That's what happened in the 1990s housing bubble. Is they put a lot of people with low credit scores in arms, and so they'll go, "Hey, you'll be 6% for 3 years, and at the end of by the end of that 3 years, your credit will be better as long as you make every payment on time. Just refinance, and as long as you refinance, it won't balloon up to 13% interest. Which means if you're at 6%, you go 13% interest. That means you're doubling the amount of interest. And just newsflash." When you first buy a house when it's starting off at that 30 years, the bulk of your payment is going toward interest. And it's
Mhm.
only as you get further and further into the loan that the amount of that's going toward interest reduces and the amount that's going to principal increases, which is why you own the house at the end of the 30 years, because the amount that you're paying incrementally. And that's also part of the reason why banks sell those loans, because they make money up front and then they sell it to somebody else and let somebody else take the risk and such.
Mhm.
So and that reminded me that I left out one of the entities involved in buying the house, which is the title company. So I talked about the realtor, I talked about the appraiser, I talked about the inspector, and I talked about the bank broker. And then another entity is the title company. So the title company, like every house has like a social security number. That's the best way I could describe it, right? So your house has a social security number. So what happens if like the previous owner of the house had someone install a deck and they made an agreement to pay them at the end of the building the deck, but then they didn't pay that person at the end of building the deck. They decided to sell the house. Well, the person who built the deck can actually put a lien on your house, and they can say, hey, you owe me $20,000 for building that deck, and since you didn't pay me, then I have a $20,000 stake in your house. And if you buy that house and that person isn't paid at the sale of that house, then you inherit that debt, because the debt is on a lien is against the house, not necessarily against the person, or not necessarily against the person. So what a title company does is they research the history of the social security number. And again, I'm calling it a social security number. It's not a social security number, but I'm trying to give you an idea of what it's akin to. So they research the history
It's
of
tied to that address.
right to that address. They research the history of that piece of land and that property that's associated with that piece of land, and they see if anybody owes any loans or has any stakes or claims to that house. And if they do, then the person who's selling the house needs to clear that before you buy the house so that you don't end up inheriting a problem. Also, what a title company does is they insure their work. So if they research it and they miss something and you buy the house and then someone comes along and they say, I have a claim on this house, then that title company's insurance pays off that debt so that you don't get stuck paying that debt. So a title company is another entity that's involved in buying a house, and that's the role that they play. They play making sure that that property, and a title company, that can be like $1,000. That's more expensive than the appraisal. That's more expensive than the inspector, in part because it's not only the work they're doing, but it comes in with an insurance policy to cover anything that's unexpected. So that's also another entity involved in buying a house. And then you also have, if you're buying a house with a conventional loan, and if you're buying a house with a conventional loan, I'm not sure if it's with a federal loan also. I'm gonna need to ask Trey about that. Trey about that. I can't remember. But if you're buying a house with a conventional loan and you're and they're allowing you to put less down than a certain equity ratio, and equity means the amount of actual cash value that you have in a house. So if the house is $300,000, the bank doesn't want to
less
write
than
a loan.
20%. You got to get mortgage insurance.
You're right. That's what I was about to. You know exactly where I'm going. If it's less than that 20% threshold, then they'll force you to get PMI insurance, and PMI insurance might be $50 a month. But that $50 a month, basically you have to pay until your equity crosses that threshold, in which case you can drop the insurance. And that's just so that, because it's a conventional loan and it's not federally insured, if the loan goes bad and the bank is actually taking on the responsibility of that loan, they want to have a backup. So that's their substitute for the insurance, like the federal government that has for homes, to make sure that you got that you don't if the worst case scenario happens, that they're secure. So they force you to buy PMI insurance, and they make you buy it. You don't have a choice. It's just like gap insurance. It's a little bit different than gap insurance. You have a choice in gap insurance if you bought a car. You don't have no choice in no PMI. You got to get it until that threshold is crossed for the value of the house. And then lastly, thing I'm going to talk about is homeowners associations, which Sean knows is very near and dear to my heart these days. And I know it's near and dear to his heart because he's on the board or somewhere related to one of the committee for his homeowners association. So back in the 90s, lots of cities and counties wanted to relieve some of the responsibilities that they have to repave roads and do some of that infrastructure stuff that we talked about earlier associated with your taxes. So they'll go, hey, we'll charge you less taxes, but then your community owns the land that you're on. So an investor will go, hey, I'm going to buy this piece of land. I'm going to have it surveyed, and I'm going to have it zoned for housing. And so in my neighborhood, they had it surveyed and zoned for 100 houses. So they had it carved off, and each house is 1/100th of the owner of the land that we actually sit on. And the streets in our neighborhood, we're responsible for maintaining those streets. So we also in my neighborhood have this big pond in the middle of our neighborhood, and we're responsible for dredging, which means cleaning the bottom of that pond and making sure that the sewers that it connects to when it needs to be, when it rains real heavy and it has irrigation and stuff, that all of that stuff is maintained. We're responsible for all of that, as well as sidewalks, as well as, common areas. So around on the outside of our neighborhood is grass, that between the sidewalk and our neighborhood is grass. We own all of that. So we have to cut the grass. We have to trim the trees. We have to pave the sidewalks. Whenever that sidewalk get uneven, we're the people that got to fix it. So, right. So homeowners associations is the way that neighborhoods since the 90s, most neighborhoods or many neighborhoods, particularly in subdivisions where their communities, the way they build houses now is they come up with a homeowners association. They come up with a fee, usually something like, it can be something like $100 a month. $100 a year, $200 a year, $500 a year. Older they get, they go up a little bit. It might get to the point where you're $50 a month, $600 a year, even $100 a month, $1,200 a year for a homeowners association. It all depends on the cost of maintaining all of these common areas. And as you know, with inflation, you got, cutting grass, everything comes cheaper because you got gas and, and buying concrete, everything the cost of everything is going up. So along with homeowners associations also come You know, they have the like basically you're one. In my case, I'm 1/100th of an owner of the community. That means that while I own my own house, and I basically I own my own house. My house is connected to all of the. They're not physically connected, but it's associated with all the other houses in the community. So everyone has a say in certain standards. They can go, oh, we only want brown houses in our neighborhood. In which case, even though you own your house, you can't paint your house blue. Or you can't put blue siding on your house because our homeowners association has came together and said this is the color scheme we want our neighborhood to be. They say this is how tall your grass can get. If your grass get taller than this, we'll find you a fee. You know, because their home value is impacted by the way you keep your home. And if you keep your home like Sanford and Son, that's going to lower the value of my home because my home is in the same community as yours. So homeowners associations are important for multiple reasons. One is you're not the sole say in how you manage your house. Now, there's usually a lot of leeway. Like this, it's usually not so that you can't do the average thing to your house. You want to put bushes in the front or you want to put flowers in the front.
Well, it depends.
Yeah, everyone's different. Every homeowners association is different, you know. But yeah, I'm saying there are some things that you could do to your house where it's not a big thing. But for the most part, homeowners associations is about keeping your house up so that property values appraise like they're supposed to, and not being a bad neighbor and depreciating the property values. But every neighborhood is a little bit different. Like in my mind, my neighborhood is more of a blue collar neighborhood. Like a lot of people here are policemen. They are, you know, workers at Ford, workers at GM, you know. So while there might be some white collar people here, in my mind, the bulk of our community are blue collar workers or blue collar retirees. And so blue collar people have different values than white collar people. White collar people usually they drill down further. There's more stipulations because, you know, and their houses are a bigger investment for them, and so they're way more regulated. Whereas blue collar neighborhoods, it can vary, and their blue collar neighborhoods can be sometimes too. But I think that white collar neighborhoods are usually more strenuous than blue collar neighborhoods. Blue collar people just have common values. We are like, hey, we appreciate hard work, you know, and we're willing to tolerate a little bit more than other people. But homeowners associations, like a homeowners association can be the type of entity that can put a lien on your house. If you ain't paying your homeowners association, they can fine you. And if you go long enough without paying those homeowners association, they can put a lien on your house. You know, one thing that you should also be aware of is if you can actually contact your bank, and just like you have your taxes and your insurance paid out of your escrow, you can actually have your homeowners association included, and they'll pay your homeowners association too. And so it doesn't cost you anything other than what it's going to cost you to actually pay those fees. And you just have to let them know when the dues are due. You let them know how much the dues are, and they just factor that into your escrow, and that becomes a regular part of your payment. And you don't even have to think about it. It's out of sight, out of mind. You just have to make sure that you're not getting fined for violations, so that they're sending in less money than you actually owe. Because if you let your grass grow long and you get fined for your grass, or you're leaving garbage cans out there for 4 days in a row and you're getting fined for your garbage cans being out there, you know, your escrow is only going to pay whatever that annual fee is. They're not going to know that you owe more money than that. So, you know, you have to keep up with that. And usually always it's usually a volunteer committee from homeowners in the community that's on the board. You usually can elect them every year or every 2 years or so. And so like, you know who's running your neighborhood because you all live in the same neighborhood. It's a certain number of houses and you voted for whoever's in there, or, you know, you knew you were voting for someone else. So you knew who was in there because you know who was up for vote. So yeah, so that's the 411 on houses. And houses is a big part of the stabilization of our lives. Is a big part of how we actually gain wealth, because just like the market increases in value over time, houses increase in value over time. For instance, you know, my house, I've been in my house for less than 10 years. My house has doubled in value. So that means what I paid for it, it's worth more, twice as much as what I paid for it. That's a great return on investment. You know, if I didn't need a place to live, I'd sell the place, take my gains, although I don't want to pay the taxes on it. But yeah, that's a great way to stabilize your life. And the only other piece of advice I would have is this. Okay, the more established you are in life when you buy a house, I strongly encourage a 15-year mortgage over a 30-year mortgage because you'll own the house faster. 15 years flies by. I'm telling you.
Less interest too.
Right. It is less interest, but it's a higher payment up front. But then you get to the point where you have no payment a lot quicker. Because again, 15 years flies by. And by the end of that 15 years, you'll have increased value of the house from appreciation, the housing value actually going up. And if you end up with no mortgage, often what people will do is they'll go, hey, I bought this house. I might rent this house out or Airbnb this house. I'll keep it as an asset in my, in my estate. I'll keep it as an asset in my estate. Something else we'll talk about in the future, like credit. We'll talk about estates and the estate planning. And you'll go, now I'm a first-time house buyer. Let me go out and buy another house. And that's just another way to, to save and invest your money. And sometimes you can go, hey, my kids are now adults and they're responsible adults and they're getting started on their life. And instead of buying a starter house, I'll rent them, my house that I own, the house they grew up in, because that's what families do, or they sell them the house. Hey, I'm gonna sell you the house that you grew up in. So these are just some things that you can consider when you're thinking about buying a house. Just like investing in your 401k and spending money and realizing that there's almost no way to lose. It's virtually impossible for you to lose if you getting matched your 401k, because at the very least, let's just say you get that match and the market is down for 10 years straight. You're still going to make more money because you got it matched. So even if you're losing a percentage of that money over 10 years, you can't lose because you've already doubled your money the moment you put it in there. Right.
Yep.
So that's,
and you're not losing when the market is down. You're buying those paper assets at a discount.
Exactly. That's philosophically, that's ultimately what you're doing. You're recognizing that over every 30 years, when you look at the market, it's gained. So even if you're in an extended period of recession where you're buying things cheap, you got to realize that, hey, buying cheap is a really good thing, because often when that market finally turns and goes back up, the gains that you're going to make are going to far outweigh what you lost when it took that dip. And the more you can buy while it's down, the more increase you're going to get when it goes up. So and it's time is with both a house and with investing in 401k. Time is ticking whether you participate or not. What's going to happen is this: 5 years from now, 10 years from now, you're going to look up and you're going to have zero in that account, or you're not going to own a house because you never took the time to do something that was beneficial and stabilizing for your life. Or you're going to turn around and say, man, it's one of the best decisions I've made in my life to put this money in this account, because you can see it. You can actually see and experience the benefits of the hard work and the dutiful responsibility that you have been practicing by investing and buying a house.
Yeah. And then the only thing I got to add to that is, what they say is, when you buy a home, they say buying a home is the best hedge of inflation. So what that means is, when inflation is, happening, you can protect yourself, because when they say hedge, a hedge is, a illustration for protecting yourself, right? What I mean by that is, if you buy a house right now, and let's just say your payment is $2,000 a month, that may be a lot right now to some people, right? However, in 20 years, your payment is still $2,000. So when everybody else is paying $3,500,
Mm-hmm.
you've secured for 30 years that you're still going to be paying the same amount for housing. So that's why they say it's a hedge against inflation, because while everybody else's housing costs are fluctuating because they're living in an apartment and they're renting and this and that, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with that. However, while we're talking about the topic of financial freedom, you can hedge yourself against inflation by buying a home. Because if you buy a home today, July 10th, 2024, and your mortgage payment is $2,000, in 2044, your payment is going to be exactly the same. And just like right now, people who bought homes in 2004, how much do you think their payment is? Right?
Right.
There's some people. There's some people that are living in some awesome neighborhoods that's paying like $700 a month. And every time their mortgage payment comes, they just laugh and write the check because they've got like a 4-bedroom, 3-bath house with a finished basement and a big yard for $700 a month because they've hedged themselves against inflation by buying a house in 2004. And in 2004, that $700 may have been a stretch to that family. Like, hey, babe, it's $700 a month, but we're going to figure it out. We're going to figure it out. But now, 20 years later, that same family is, finding great joy in paying $700 a month.
You preaching, and we have to, like, our people, African American people, Hispanic people, people of color, for as I referenced, in passing earlier, like, we were locked out of the system for a long time. Like, when racism was much more prevalent and overt, they wouldn't allow you to buy a house. Read The Color of Law, and it gives you the history of housing here in America. And so now, what a great privilege to live in a time where I don't have to deal with that type of stuff, where I can just actually, buy a house. The thing is, I'm helping you in ways that I wasn't helped. I told you in the last one how I was a victim of predatory lending because there was no one to teach me all this stuff. I learned all of this stuff by trial and error and from making mistakes and being determined not to make the same mistake again. So I had to get educated so that I understood what I was getting myself into. Now, like, I promise you, I'm that person that read almost every contract. I'm not about to say, like, lawyers would be like, here, just need to sign here. You can read it, but you just need to sign here. I'm that person that's just going to be sitting there reading for 10 minutes. And you're going to figure it out real quick. I'm about to read every last page of this. I was telling Sean, like, I literally read 40 pages of my homeowners association, every bylaw. I read every last one, and I wrote notes down on every last bylaw because I'm like, long gone are the days of me just signing contracts and finding out later that I made a mistake, that someone took advantage of me. And I know everybody don't have the patience for that. I know it. Like, but for me, it's like, hey, shame on me if you fool me once. I mean, shame on you if you fool me once. Shame on me if you fool me twice.
Yeah,
I'm just determined to not let that happen to me again. And I read fast enough where hey, it's 50 pages, brother. You might as well go get you some coffee. I'll call you when I'm done. I'm gonna read every last one of those pages. You're not about to get me, and I'll be asking questions. What's this here? Well, how come this number don't match this number here? This is what you told me. This number, that ain't the number you told me right there. What's that?
Yeah.
You have to explain. You got some explaining to do, as Ricky Ricardo would say. Somebody got some explaining to do.
Then they're gonna be like, dang it, he knows how to read. Where they find this one from?
I tell you what, though, you're not gonna get me again. No, sir. You're not gonna get me again. See, I encourage y'all, man, invest in retirement. Like I said, time is ticking, and whether you participate or not, time is ticking. And you're gonna look at other people. Go ahead.
Your retirement is coming.
It certainly is.
It's all about, will you be prepared?
It's gonna be fun or it's gonna be not fun. That's the two options. Retirement can be like.
And I'll be transparent. When I was younger, I would see that money building up in my 401k, and I would take it out and I'll go buy some rims and buy some gym shoes
and get double taxed on it, pay that penalty.
Right, all of that kind of stuff. I mean, I was paying myself back, boy, but it was just like, it was just stupid stuff, right? Just being reckless, not looking at it for retirement. I'm looking at it like, oh man, I can buy some 20s for my car instead of me looking at it as a vehicle to wealth. And then every time I change jobs, I used to take it out and just put it in the bank instead of me rolling it over to a new 401k.
Mm-hmm.
And before you know it, it's just shopping spree or
Mm.
doing something dumb with the money instead of rolling it over into the next um, company's 401k. So I mean, I've haven't always had the same perspective on retirement, but before you know it, once you kind of get in your 40s, all of a sudden that thing is getting closer to you.
This is not related to this, but I'm about to brag a little bit for the community, for the purpose of it. Like me and Sean, like we grew up, like I promise you, we grew up in a very impoverished circumstances. Like it's easy for people to look at it where we're at now and to think, they think I'm rich. I'm so far from rich, it's ridiculous. I'm just very frugal. I'm debt free, and that gives me the luxury to, I'm not paying a stupid tax. Stupid tax is when you pay interest and give somebody else money that you don't have to give away. This poor boy from Detroit, raised by a single mother on welfare. Tell me how you did it, as Tupac says. I could have never imagined my life being what it is today. And I'm like, this is a picture earlier this year. I was in Panama. This is Cologne, Panama. It's Panama City. I flew to Panama, and then I went to I was all over the place. I went to Panama, and I went to, where else I go to? I went to Cartagena, Colombia. Oh my goodness. Look at this. I was in Colombia. It was beautiful there. It was beautiful there. Like I could have never imagined going to places as exotic as these places. But now it's like, man, that's like, I don't buy shoes and expensive stuff, but I like to travel. And this is me
But on the other
doing.
hand, I hardly go anywhere because I say to myself, I can put that money in the stock market.
Yeah, I like to travel. This is me. This is me in actual Rome. Look at that. That's me in Rome last year. I was in Rome
Man,
at the Colosseum.
that joke could
I
be
was in.
everywhere.
Oh yeah, I'm trying to. This is me. That's me in Paris. Wait a minute. It's France. No, this is the Leaning Tower of Pisa. This is Italy too. It's just Florence, Italy, versus Rome. I'll be all over the place. I was in Paris. I was in France. I could have never imagined my life being what it is today. And again, like I say, people think I'm rich. I'm not rich. I am not rich by any stretch of the imagination. I don't pay the stupid tax. I can't remember the last time I've paid a penny in interest. I have one credit card, and I pay that mug off the entire balance every single month religiously. Do not pay a single penny in interest for anything, not for a car, not for the only thing I would pay interest for is a house. Everything else, it's like I'm like, give me 0% interest, give me that 1.9%, and I'm just gonna keep it for a year, and then I'm gonna pay this mug off. You know what I'm saying? So I'm trying not to give money away, because the money that a lot of people give away, I save that money and I go on vacation with it. that's what I'm doing with mine. So that's me, this poor boy from Detroit who could have never. I never went on a single vacation as a kid. I don't even think I went down south as a kid. I can't even have a single memory of even going down south to visit family, which was the type of vacation that poor people from Detroit took growing up. I didn't have one of them. So for me to be able to go places that I've seen on TV and say, wow, man, I've been here, I've been here, I've been here, I've been here, I've been here. That's God, man.
Yeah.
That's God. That's God and the wisdom of God in my life, and me not giving away a bunch of money and interest, and me not, prioritizing foolish purchases and stuff, and me prioritizing, being financially stable.
Yes, sir.
That's right.
Well, I need some Z's. I need to
I feel you.
rest up. But definitely good talk. Hopefully somebody can catch it on the replay. I know it's a little late for folks in the middle of the week.
Mhm.
But hopefully it's some good helpful stuff. And if nothing else, it was good fellowship. I appreciate it.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yeah, but I pray. Let me pray real quick.
Yeah.
God, I just we thank you. Thank you for your grace and your kindness. Two poor boys from Detroit never could imagine our lives being as blessed as they are today. And we owe that to you. The wisdom from your word on how to handle money and with people that like Dave Ramsey picking that up and spreading it across the world, and for us to encounter that, to pick up on it, to put it into practice and to see the fruits of it. What a blessing. What a blessing. It's part of the reason why we're so motivated to encourage others to do the same, to recognize that, in spite of, meager beginnings, like you can bless in ways that eyes have not seen, ears have not heard, neither has it entered into the hearts of man. So I just pray for people. I pray that more people, particularly our people, all people, of course, but our people who've been left out, people of color who've been left out. I just pray that this recording gets seen by many people and it gets taken to heart, and that other people begin to share their testimonies of how you bless them, and that you make them the head, not the tail, and the lender and not the borrower. And we just thank you. We thank you for the wisdom. We thank you for the grace, and we thank you for this opportunity. In Jesus' name, amen.
In Jesus' name, amen.
Yes,
Amen.
sir.
Well, all right then, brother.
All right, man.
I'll catch up with you, man.
Yep. Peace.
All right, yep.